I don't know if that comes to the microphone or not. Whether it needs to be. There we go. So I'm Art Milhammed. I'm a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility for many years, and I have the honor of introducing Martin Fleck, who is the Security Program Director for Physicians for Social Responsibility. Security program opposes all the programs of national insecurity, nuclear weapons, and the like, and works for nuclear disarmament, nuclear weapons abolition, works for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, works to reduce the huge amount of wasteful spending in the Pentagon and so forth. We've been doing this kind of work since 1982, which is about when I started doing my own, actually. He was with the Nuclear Weapons Freeze campaign, which I was working for also, and was national coordinator for Nuclear Weapons Free World. He was the executive director of Washington State PSR for 16 years, and in the Washington State SANE, S-A-N-E, SANE program for 6 years. As a member of PSR, he was sent to Russia, working with Russian physicians who were dealing with the health effects of their nuclear weapons program. And when they sent a team to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip from Washington State PSR, they also sent him. Well, beyond these, I'm introducing Martin, but I'm also going to introduce his talk just a little bit, because having done all those things, it's a miracle he's still here. And I say that because it's a miracle any of us are still here, actually. As John Kennedy said at the United Nations, I think it was in 1962, every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident, miscalculation, or madness. The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us. Well, General Butler retired from, Lee Butler retired, having been the commander of all the nuclear forces, and he says, it is only by a little bit of technical excellence, a lot of luck, and a lot of divine grace that we're still here. He thinks it's mostly divine grace, so God has probably given up on giving us enough to get by on in the future. So every day we're still here is fortunate. Many people now think the risk of accidental nuclear war right now is worse than at any time in the Cold War. Sam Day, but we don't realize it, as Sam Day said in 2001, we still have no conception as a society of the incredibly unique, devastating, destructive force of nuclear weapons. We have almost no concept of that. We also have no concept of how close we have been on numerous occasions to having those weapons used. Well, the program of PSR and of Martin today is to act on Phil Berrigan's observation, which is that without consciousness, there can be no conscience. So you have to have some idea of what's going on and what you're dealing with, whether you have. And when it comes to nuclear weapons, there can be no conscience and no hope. So, Martin's going to talk about one of the aspects of nuclear weapons that has become a way of raising that consciousness in the world and raising activity to eliminate nuclear weapons, and that is what is called the humanitarian, looking at the humanitarian aspect of nuclear weapons. So, Martin, thank you for coming to the conference today.
When you work in Washington, D.C., you get used to taking advantage of photo ops, if and when they happen. Check it out, it's almost going to make it.
We can move this over.
Yeah, we're going to move this over just a little bit. And if I am in the way of the screen for somebody, I would ask, yeah, scoot around a little bit. A little exercise, scoot around. All right, is it still there? That is kind of miraculous to hook it up and have it work immediately. Okay, what else have I got in my pockets? I've got postcards. So you definitely will. There will be a what you can do section of this presentation, and this is one of those things. So don't let me forget it. I have right here a petition. This is to President Obama, and it says, "I call on my government to start negotiations for a treaty banning nuclear weapons." So before I even get started, before I even tell you my credentials, but although he did a great job, I think I'm just going to start sending this around. And it's really nice to come to a place like this and be introduced by a fine Maryland PSR member. What could be more appropriate than that? And to stand in front of a Wolf banner next to a peace pole, so I kind of know I'm right at home. I feel very at home in this environment. But I'm going to warn you that this is a petition to Obama. He has pledged to work for a world free of nuclear weapons. He's come up short on that. He needs a little prodding, and that's what this is about. If you sign this, we will, or if you don't even have to sign it, you print your name on there, we will deliver it to Obama. But I'm going to tell you, if you put your email address on this, we will put you on our security action alert list. So if for some reason you don't want that, please don't put your email on there, although if you pay attention to what I'm saying, you'll probably want to be on. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. That's the spirit. Thanks for the microphone. That really makes it very luxurious. Okay, let's see. My wife and I, on Thursday, we went out for Chinese food, and I got this in my fortune cookie. It says, "You are of double character, an active socialite, and a serious thinker." Okay, let's see if we can live up to that. That's a lot of hype right there. And as Art told you, I work with PSR. I'm the security program director. I'm not a doctor. I work for a bunch of doctors, but I'm not a doctor. However, my initials are MD Fleck. That's about as close as I get. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a nuclear weapons expert, although I've been working with nuclear weapons long enough that I'm more familiar than I could ever want to be with them. And I know that I don't need to tell you folks in this room that nuclear weapons are bad and that it would be good to get rid of them. So I'm not really going to dwell too much. I'm happy to tell you. I'm not going to dwell on how bad they are, although I can't help but tell you one or two things about them. And then I'm going to spend quite a lot of my time talking to you about a new international initiative that's swirling around the world that I really want Americans to know about. And this is what I've been mostly talking about all year. And I want you to know that the long history of working on nuclear weapons that Art just talked about, I've been working on this since 1982. It's an affront to me that this issue that I'm going to talk to you about was not resolved before I was born. It's ridiculous. I was born in '58. Everybody knew there was a problem. It was already completely apparent that we were on the wrong path. And it's amazing to me that, frankly, I even have to work on this. But I'm here to tell you that I'm not going to work on it alone. I need your help. We're going to work on it. So, I work for a bunch of really great doctors. And this is our Iowa conference that we had, a chapter leadership meeting. And I work for these doctors who work during the day, helping their patients in clinic, helping their patients stay healthy, get healthy, and help them with their troubles. And then, after a long day of doing that, then they go home, and then they spend time with PSR, helping the world with its troubles, helping the world with the gravest health threats to the world. And so I'm really proud to be associated with these kind of doctors. And, you know, it's easy to forget about the nuclear weapons, especially after the Soviet Union collapsed. I think a lot of us thought that we could take a breather and it was going to be okay. Unfortunately, it's not okay. Surprisingly, there's actually still over 15,000 nuclear weapons in the world. And you know what, this is a detail is, this is actually kind of good news, because just a year ago when I was giving these talks, that was over 16,000. That was about 16,300. Both the United States and Russia have been dismantling some nuclear weapons, and we're really happy about that. And if you want, I see notes being taken. This comes from the FAS, the Federation of American Scientists, and that's where you can find this info. The reigning expert on these numbers is Hans Christensen. Now, nuclear weapons are different. They're very different. And so there are some young people here, and I just want you to understand that it's not like piling up guns or tanks or something like that. Nuclear weapons are a completely different animal. And this particular picture is of a test in 1954 of the largest nuclear bomb the United States ever made. It was called Castle Bravo. They thought it was going to be about 6 megatons. It ended up being 15 megatons, so that was kind of an oops. They had no idea it was going to be so huge. It ended up being 1,000 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. The mushroom cloud reached 130,000 feet in 6 minutes. The crater that it left is over 1 mile in diameter. When they blew this off as a test, it was a complete public health disaster. Fallout spread over 7,000 square miles. 665 people in the Marshall Islands were exposed to radiation. And then 80 miles, just to give you an idea of the power of this thing, there was a fishing boat 80 miles downwind of this test. And when the fallout hit that fishing boat, it made every sailor on that boat sick. They were in the hospital for 7 months and one of them died. 80 miles away from this. Just to give you an idea of what I mean when I say that they're different. These are different. And the motto, or the theme of Physicians for Social Responsibility and our international organization, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, is that there is no adequate medical response to this. And that's why we work so hard, and we've been working since '62, to the only real meaningful medical response is to eliminate these nuclear weapons so they can never be used. And our motto is, prevention is the only cure. So, something new, and then I'm going to stop with how bad nuclear weapons are. Oh, I probably went around with a petition, but I have a copy of this. It's on the clipboard, going around with a petition. But we, Physicians for Social Responsibility in our international organization, IPPNW, we put out this report, Nuclear Famine, and the second edition, the new research indicates that 2 billion people are at risk from a very small war. What they're doing here is they're taking about 0.5% of the arsenals of the world. 0.5%. So, and they're theorizing what would happen if India and Pakistan had a nuclear war. Both of those countries have nuclear weapons. I want to tell you that when Art and I started working on disarmament, neither of those countries had nuclear weapons. Okay, that's happened since we started working on disarmament. Not to mention, what's the other one, North Korea. But India and Pakistan unfortunately have a habit of fighting with each other, and in the event that they use their nuclear weapons, if they used 100 Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons, 15 kilotons, frankly, these are like firecrackers compared to what Russia and the United States has. If they used 100 of these nuclear weapons against cities, it would cause fires, and those fires would put about 5 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere. So the scientists that we've been working on, and these are the same scientists who were talking about nuclear winter back in the 80s, they've been studying this amazing huge volcano eruption in 1815 where it caused a 1.25 degree temperature drop. And that had an effect on killing frosts, it had an effect on the ability to grow crops, and so now they're taking this nuclear weapon data and they're plugging it into the computer models to see what would happen. So if there was a nuclear war in South Asia, like I talked about, only 100 weapons, only Hiroshima-sized, 20 million deaths in major cities in India and Pakistan. But you guys, you're not having trouble seeing this, are you?
No.
Is it okay?
You can turn off that light.
If we turn off the lights,
This one.
that'd be a great idea. Now, don't anybody go to sleep because we're turning out the lights, all right? This is more exciting than you think, and it's going to get a little more hopeful here in a sec. All right, but obviously, we're talking about using nuclear weapons on cities. 20 million deaths in neighbor cities in India and Pakistan. The radioactive contamination would spread throughout the whole region, not just in those two countries. And there'd be global climate disruption from the smoke and the soot. And according to the Nuclear Famine Report, there would be a decade-long crop loss in the entire northern hemisphere. Okay, so that means even the United States. That even means the breadbasket of the United States would see disruptions to agriculture. So, as you all know who grow anything, grow gardens, frost-free days are what's most important, and there'd be 10 to 20 less frost-free days per year for 10 years. There would be a 10% reduction in global precipitation. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of this climate data that we're using has a little more purchase these days because climate change, has become more, people are understanding that climate change is possible and really happens. Right now, there's already 800 million people in the world who are really close to being on the edge as far as their nutrition, not getting enough calories. Those people would be at risk. And according to our report, up to 2 billion people could die just from those 100 Hiroshima-sized weapons, just 0.5% of the arsenals. Now, that does make you think. The United States has a large arsenal, over 7,000 nuclear weapons, and our posture is that those are there to deter others, but if need be, we will use them. And we make sure that we're able to use them, and some of them can be launched within a minute of the instruction. So, Ira Helfand is the chair of our security committee, and he wrote a letter to the New York Times which concluded with, "Do we see ourselves as a nation of suicide bombers?" Because the global famine report indicates that even the attacker, even if there's not a young folk, fantastic. Boy, do I have some handouts for you. Do we see ourselves as a nation of suicide bombers? The point being, even if there's no retaliation, let's say we did a first strike on some nation, took out all of their weapons, won the war, the disruption to agriculture would still kill billions of people. Now, another thing to realize, of course, and Art was alluding to this, is that every day that goes by with these weapons on high alert is another day where something could go haywire. And Eric Schlosser wrote this amazing book. I was writing in the margins while I was reading this book and noted 78 incidents where something went wrong with the American nuclear weapons, not even to mention the Chinese ones, the Russian ones, those other ones out there, the North Korean ones. Just among the American weapons, there were 78 snafus, things that went haywire. And Eric Schlosser was speaking at a conference and he said, when the odds of something are low, it still may happen. The problem with luck is that it eventually runs out. All right, this is fun. This is a brand new slide. I put the slide in this morning. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, what on earth does the NFL have to do with my talk? Well, this guy, Chris Borland, is 24 years old. I bet a lot of people in this room are familiar with this story. Okay? Chris Borland, linebacker, retired from the NFL at 24. Why would he do that?
Head injury.
Head injuries.
And maybe the most fantastic thing about his story, which was on CBS Sunday Morning, he gave back $400,000 in his bonus money. That's astonishing.
For research into...
Yeah, well, he felt he did not earn the money. He recognized the possible consequences of playing football, and he gave money because he's a remarkable individual.
He's a smart guy. So, the part that struck me, because I actually saw this, they hand me a newspaper every day when I get on the metro, right? And I rarely even look into sports, honestly. It's not that I'm not into sports, but I happened to see this headline about this guy. And the headline was something like, too risky, or something like that. And then there's a quote in this article. For me, it's wanting to be proactive. I'm concerned that if you wait until you have symptoms, it's too late. Of course, he has friends who've had trouble because of head injuries, right? And, you know, trouble that will probably never get well. They'll never get well. But that is so true also for what I'm talking about. We cannot wait until there's symptoms of a nuclear war.
Amen.
We have to work now, even though there's no nuclear weapons flying. One of my sayings I've always had all my life is, when the missiles fly, we'll all be peace activists. Right? That's not going to do as much good, is it? Really? So, fortunately, I'm here to tell you that, hallelujah, the United Nations and the Non-Proliferation Treaty are riding into the rescue, or I wish that was true. Way back in 1968, they began negotiating the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it went into effect in 1970. The United States, Russia, China, France, and Great Britain are part of this, plus a whole slew, another 185 nations. So there's 190 nations altogether that have signed on to this treaty. And I'm happy to report to you that those 5 nuclear nations I just talked about have promised to pursue disarmament. Each of the parties to the treaty undertakes to pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date and to nuclear disarmament, and on a treaty on general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. All right, so let's all take care. That was back in 1970, so that was 45 years ago. Now, that's only Article 6. The rest of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, a lot of it is about preventing nations from being able to have a nuclear weapons capability. It's a great treaty. It really is. It's done great things. It's the basis for our negotiations with Iran. Iran is a signatory to the treaty. But there's this problem, and the problem is that the nuclear weapon states have not lived up to their obligations.
Amen.
I know, I'm preaching to the converted so much here. So we're really at a decision point right now. We're at a crossroads. We can either decide to keep on going the way we've been going, where the countries that have nuclear weapons keep on modernizing and making them better, and additional countries keep piling on. Right now it's at 9, but it could get worse. Or we could decide to take a different path, which says, all right, you know what? These nuclear weapons are useless, and it's time to throw them in the dustbin of history.
What countries did not sign that?
Okay, good quiz. India and Pakistan, Israel and North Korea. So we've got 5, there's only 9 nuclear states. 5 of them are on board. I'm sorry?
And I think South Africa.
South Africa is a signatory. South Africa got rid of their nuclear weapons. They had like 5 of them, and they got rid of them, thank goodness. So here's the thing, even despite the Non-Proliferation Treaty promise that the United States made, the United States continues to go full bore on a complete modernization program of every kind of nuclear weapon we have, and I mean everything. They want a new bomber, they want a new land-based missile, they want an entire fleet of new Trident submarines. Well, they won't call them Tridents, they'll call them something else. At an incredible cost, $348 billion over the next 10 years, that's the Congressional Budget Office's estimate. All right, the Center for Non-Proliferation Research extrapolated this out further, and it's over 30 years, it's $1 trillion investment in nuclear weapons. So this is the path that we're on, and the path I'm urging you to help me get off of. Now, this is Rose Gottemiller. Does anyone in the room know Rose Gottemiller? Okay, well then you won't be upset. This was an article that was in Kyoto News just a little, a few days ago, April 25th. Is that like last week? And the DC reporter for Kyoto News, which is a Japanese outfit, interviewed Rose Gottemiller. She's the Undersecretary for State for Arms Control. And in this article, it says, Gottemiller dismissed criticism that the United States spends a lot of money to improve its nuclear capability. See, this was right on the verge. This is 2 days before the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference got started, which was just this last Monday. Okay? Just this last Monday was the first day of the review conference, where once again, for the 9th time, all those signatories to the treaty are figuring out whether or not they should keep it going. What's the status of the treaty? How's it working? Is it successful? So Gottemiller answers this Japanese reporter. It's just making sure that if we ever had to use them, they would actually explode. And the United States is not giving the weapons any new military capabilities, she said. So this is what you hear from officials, and I hate to say it, but Rose Gottemiller, I have met her, and she's more on the dovish side, okay, of the military-industrial complex in the United States. But that's, what can I say? Okay. This reminds me of my absolute favorite Groucho Marx quote. Wait for it. Who are you going to believe? Me or your own two eyes? A little credibility problem going on. So there's a whole new, frankly, since the last review conference of the NPT, which was 2010, there's a whole new international thing going on. It's broiling along. And for those of you who just entered the room after I started speaking, there's a petition going around. And if you put your name, if you put your email on that petition, that means you're going to get action alerts from PSR, from me. I hope you don't mind. Okay? Thank you. So, here's what I'm here to tell you about. This is what I'm here to evangelize about in the evangelical church. Nuclear weapons should be banned and eliminated. Now, you all know that, but what's different about it is that we have a precedent. Landmines, there's a ban treaty in place. Cluster munitions, there's a ban treaty in place. Chemical weapons and biological weapons were banned long ago. Why? What's the reason why? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Why were chemical weapons and biological weapons banned? Indiscriminate. Especially indiscriminate killing of civilians. Well, I gotta tell you, nuclear weapons are the big granddaddy when it comes to indiscriminate killing of civilians. Don't forget, the Lucky Dragon was 80 miles downwind of a nuclear test. One of those sailors died. All of the rest of them got sick. It's an indiscriminate weapon. That's why it says nukes next. PSR believes it is time, once and for all, to put the nuclear weapons in the dustbin of history. So, hold on just a second. I'm going to give this to Art. He's going to move around. Now, I have to take pictures because back at the home office, they need proof that I was really here, and so we can put it in the newsletter and whatnot. So you pardon me, but that's the fact. If I'm going to go out here and do more of this kind of stuff, I need you to sign all those petitions, and I need Art to take some photos so I can keep doing this. Okay. So, one way to think about it is, let's just say that you decided you wanted to put a ban on smoking in public places. Okay? Well, I mean, I'm sure there's some smokers in the room. That's cool. Not that you're one, but if you did, do you think it would be a good strategy to go first to the smokers and ask them to enact a ban? I mean, aren't they the least likely ones to support a ban on smoking in public places, right? If you wanted to ban smoking in public places, you'd go to the non-smokers first, and you'd ask them to get organized. That is the brilliant kernel of the current ban campaign, is that the organizers of the ban campaign are not depending on the nuclear weapons states to take the lead. Let's face it, they're kind of addicted. So fortunately, we have powerful allies that are working on this ban treaty. PSR's international affiliate is the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. They won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985, not to be trifled with 62 different IPPNW organizations around the world. And then there's ICAN, that's the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. If you want to write down one website, this would be it. It's icanw.org. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Can you imagine a world without nuclear weapons? I can. ICAN was actually launched by IPPNW in 2007, and it was meant to be sort of it's for citizens, it's not for physicians and health professionals. It now has 424 partner organizations in 95 countries. So, that's another thing that I'm here to tell you is, we're here in the United States, and this is a tough road to hoe in the United States. However, we have a lot of friends in other countries. and they've been getting busy. So Norway had hosted the first Humanitarian Impact of Nuclear Weapons initiative. And you may have noticed that was the name of my talk, Humanitarian Impact of Nuclear Weapons. So really, I'm here more to talk to you about this movement, this peace movement, than I am to talk to you about the weapons themselves. Norway took the plunge, and in March of 2013, so that's after the last NPT review conference, they launched this Humanitarian Impacts of Nuclear Weapons Conference in Oslo. 127 nations sent official government delegations, okay? Of those, only 2 of them were nuclear weapon states, India and Pakistan. Now, to their credit, I think India and Pakistan are a little bit spooked about the fact that they're fighting with each other all the time and they have nuclear weapons. Then the next one, the second conference was in Mexico, and that was in February of last year, 2014. It was up to 146 nations participated. Again, only 2 nuclear weapon states, India and Pakistan. Now, there's other people piling on to this campaign. So, the International Red Cross, they passed a 4-year action plan for the complete elimination of nuclear weapons. That's the International Red Cross. That's a very highly respected organization. And then you've got, in the United Nations, 155 nations made a joint statement in October of last year. The only way to guarantee that nuclear weapons will never be used again is through their total elimination. 155 nations. That's like 3/4 of the nations of the world. And then you've got the Nobel Peace Laureates, so we're talking about people like Desmond Tutu, and de Klerk, and Lech Walesa, and Gorbachev, and who else?
Jimmy Carter.
Is Jimmy Carter a Nobel Peace? Is he?
No, Mr. Obama.
Obama has failed to come to these summits. Okay? That's right, he's a Nobel Peace Laureate. Thank you for reminding me. I don't know how I could forget that. And the Nobel Peace Laureates, over and over again, every year they meet. every year they meet, and every year for the last several years, they've been putting out resolutions saying, we urge all states to commence negotiations on a treaty to ban nuclear weapons. So these are people piling onto this campaign. And then the next conference that was scheduled was the Vienna conference. So you can tell this is like a storyline, so stay with me on this storyline, right? We had the 2010 NPT, then we had the Oslo conference, then we had the Mexico conference, then we had the International Red Cross and the Nobel Peace Laureates. Now, we're coming into Vienna. The Austrians, bless their hearts, they decided they would host the next meeting. It would be in Vienna. It was in December of last year, and PSR moved into high gear. It was time for the United States to go to these darn conferences. You know, just because you go to these conferences doesn't mean you're saying you're going to get rid of all your nukes. These are conferences to explore the humanitarian impact. Okay? Explore the humanitarian impact, like the nuclear famine stuff. So we did our first ever Move On petition. We got 5,700 signatures on our Move On petition. Thank you to everybody in the room who signed our Move On petition. This is my director, Catherine, delivering them to Rose Gotemiller's assistant on hard copy. I hope she read through every one of them. And then in Vienna, the ICANN has been partnering really closely with these national governments, and they did a civil society forum, and Ira Helfand, that's him, a little speck, speaking, and he's talking about in fact, he's showing the exact same slide I just showed you, nuclear war in South Asia. And so at the Civil Society Forum, there were 600 people who came from all over the world, and that was just prior to the official Vienna conference. And then the Vienna conference was awesome. So that was the 8th and 9th of December. I was doing really weird hours. I was like waking up at 2 in the morning so I could tune into this thing and catch it live, being streamed. 158 nations. 80% of the nations of the world came to this one. And this time, lo and behold, the United States went. And when the United States announced about 2 weeks prior to the conference they were going, the United Kingdom announced like 5 days later. So now we have 4 of the nuclear weapons states going. India, Pakistan, United States, and UK. Take a look right at that. We worked hard. Some of our people met with Gotemiller twice. We met with the national security staff. I ran into Ben Rhodes, who's an advisor to Obama, like outside the Eisenhower building, and gave him a 1-minute elevator speech. I mean, we did everything that we could to get the United States to go, and we were thrilled that they did. They didn't really say much that was really useful, but it was great that they went. It's great that they went, and I hope that the other nations feel some obligation to go, like China. They had testimony from Hibakusha, who were the atomic bomb victims, and they had testimony from downwinders here in the United States and in Kazakhstan from American and Russian testing. There was also testimony from Tony DeBroom, who's with the Marshall Islands. And I heard him speak last weekend in New York. He said that if you looked at all of the nuclear weapons tested in the Marshall Islands and you added it up, it was the equivalent, I couldn't believe this, it's the equivalent of 1.7 Hiroshima bombs going off every day in the Marshall Islands for 12 years. And we wonder. Pope Francis piled on. Awesome. Love it when the Pope gets involved. You definitely want the Pope on your side. He made a great statement. And the Austrians, they were, as the hosts, they were in charge of doing the summary statement at the end, which had to be really even-handed and include all of everybody's viewpoints, including the United States and Russia, United States and Britain, and they did. But then they did this other thing that nobody expected. We didn't even know it was coming, the Austrian pledge. Here's what the Pope said. He said, spending on nuclear weapons squanders the wealth of nations. Raise your hand if you agree. We're with the Pope on this. I am convinced that the desire for peace and fraternity planted deep in the human heart will bear fruit in concrete ways to ensure that nuclear weapons are banned once and for all to the benefit of our common home. And that was delivered by a papal nuncio at Vienna. I was just talking to a staff person for a senator about a week ago, and I was quoting this, and I said, no, that's not me talking, that's the Pope talking. The Austrian pledge is where a national government has now pledged to, they didn't say they would pledge to ban nuclear weapons, but they came close. They said they call on all states, parties to the NPT, to identify and pursue effective measures to fill the legal gap. So, here's the situation. Basically, you have everybody that I've been talking about that's on our side, including the Pope, the Nobel Peace Laureates, 3/4 of the nations of the world, the Secretary General of the United Nations has come out for complete elimination of nuclear weapons. You have most of the non-nuclear states. All the nations in the southern hemisphere of the world are in nuclear weapons-free zones. Basically, everybody in the world gets it, right? That these things are bad, and it's time to get rid of them, just like you all do already. So, on that side, you've got all these people. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, representing millions upon millions of citizens. The International Red Cross. All right, so these are the white hats, right? People with the good guys. Then over here, you got the nuclear armed states. There's only 9 of them. 4 of them went to the last Humanitarian Impact Conference. So what's happening, and the reason why the United States went, honestly, is because they get it, that they're being boxed into a corner, and they don't like that corner that they're in, because it's the bad guys. It's the guys who aren't cooperating with the entire world. And then in the middle, you have the umbrella states, and really the strategy has been, the ICANN strategy has been to really concentrate on them, and these are the countries that say or feel like they're being protected by America. They don't have nuclear weapons, but like Taiwan, Japan, NATO countries, they have often said that they're being protected by American weapons. I think I'm doing all right. I'm almost into that what you can do section. So there's been a lot of pressure developing on the umbrella states. What's great is that ICANN has a lot of power in Europe. They're extremely popular in Europe, and they're also very hip. I mean, I've been organizing for peace since 1982. I have never staged an event where people were wearing high heels and pink jumpsuits. That is hip. This is the Netherlands, ICANN chapter in Netherlands, and I'm happy to report that they got the Labour Party in the Netherlands, which is a NATO country, which does host American nuclear weapons. The Labour Party in that country has come out for the ban. Well, they've come out for the Austrian pledge. That's where ICANN is really concentrating right now. It's getting as many nations as possible to sign on. And it's happening right at the NPT right now. That meeting goes until May 22nd, and they're piling up as many sign-ons to the Austrian pledge as they can. The Austrians are doing a great job organizing, and there's 71 nations right now have signed on to the Austrian pledge. Now, there's even other stuff going on. So last weekend, 300 organizations around the world endorsed the Peace and Planet Mobilization. And that was in New York, and a slew, thousands upon thousands of Japanese citizens were there. There was a bunch of French there. I was there. These are some of my doctor buddies down below. And it was great. And another thing that happened there is they delivered 8 million signatures on petitions, almost all of those from Japanese citizens. And they had a rally at a park across the street from the UN. The picture on the top there is the march, and you notice how, once again for the newsletter, gotta have that little PSR sign there, right? We were there, PSR was there. But this is Angela Kane at the microphone, and she's receiving these 8 million signatures. She's the UN High Commissioner for Disarmament. And the lady behind her, who's kind of short, that's actually Ambassador Taos Faruqi, who is the president of the Non-Proliferation Treaty Conference. So I was of the review conference. So I was really pleased that the organizers, that's pretty high impact. And so those two got to see that there were thousands of people in New York calling for an end to nuclear weapons. So, how can I participate? I've already sent around the petition, and you know what? If you missed it last time around, grab it and please sign on. That goes to Obama, but more importantly, it helps you become part of our network, and it helps me be able to go out and do things like this. We're trying to, how should we put this? I hired a 20-something outreach associate, and it's been super helpful. I'm so glad I did. Because she's better at communicating with people younger than me than I am. Like, for instance, she's been working with an artist to come up with these kind of comics, and we'll continue to crank these out. I don't know if you can read that.
No, you can't read it back there.
Okay, it says, do you like how your tax dollars are being spent? And then over in Europe, they're saying, we have free healthcare, great education, parental leave, a month of vacation. You guys have European friends?
Yeah.
I'm amazed to hear, life's so good, I mean, there's problems. There's problems with the economy. I shouldn't jump to that conclusion. But anyway, we have all that stuff. A month of vacation, wow, and the little baby's saying, hooray! And then the United States is saying, big deal, Europe. We're spending $12 billion next year on nukes. And the little baby's saying, lame. Lame. We need nukes to keep America safe. Meanwhile, there's Ebola, melting glaciers, terrorism threats, cyber attacks, and the kids are saying, the little South Park kind of kids are saying, safe for what, the 1960s? It's the truth, isn't it? It's funny because it's true. So 1960s, these nuclear weapons, they're so last century. What? We're in a whole new millennium. And then, she's doing, this actually is a South Park takeoff here. Nukes are bad, okay? And another thing that we're doing, and I'm glad that the young folks are in the room today, and in fact now would be a good time. Lest I forget. Art, maybe you could, Art's busy getting stressed. Could you pass these around? Nuke Busters. What are you gonna call? Nuke Busters. So we're doing a film competition, right? So, how many, okay, raise your hand if you've ever had this thought. Gosh, I wish more young people would get involved in the peace movement. Okay, but I don't think we're gonna scare them into getting involved. I think we need to bring them to us. So this is something that everybody, now, if you really think hard, everybody in this room can think of somebody who might be a young person who might make a 4-minute video. Right? I mean, YouTube is awash with videos that are being made by young folk. There's going to be an award for a student, so they have to be either still in school or within a year of having graduated from college. Or there's going to be another award for a professional. So if you know any professional people who make movies, please get these flyers and take several if you want, if you have friends. But we need to get the word out about this competition. And the reason why is because young people, I had an intern last summer and I said, Will, how do people like you figure out what's going on in the world? And he says, well, we look at our devices, of course. Right? So we're going to create a video that's short enough that it could be sent to all these devices that all these young folk have. Another thing that Teresa has done, my outreach associate, who is amazing, is she took that data from the Eric Schlosser book I was telling you about, where there have been these horrible incidents with nuclear weapons, very scary incidents, and she made a map of those, and she made a map of where there's current nuclear facilities in the U.S. And you'd be amazed how close a lot of this stuff is to you, no matter where you are. So PSR has chapters all across the country, and this is very helpful for them to see that there's a local impact. So that's at psr.org. Take a look. You can click on all these little things, these little icons, you can click on them and find out. And I dare you to click on the one in South Carolina. That's a doozy. Maybe some of you are familiar with that story.
Is that one bigger than the one in Arkansas?
No, the one in Arkansas was I think a 9 megaton. Okay, yeah, that would be Damascus, Arkansas. And thank you for pointing that out. I dare you to read that one too. That's on there. Damascus, Arkansas is sort of the central part of that book, Command and Control. But in South Carolina, B-52 had some trouble with refueling, got unbalanced, went into a spiral, and the crew bailed out. The plane started to fall apart. 2 nuclear weapons fell out. One of them thought it was being dropped on a target. And if the switch hadn't been to safe in the cockpit, it would have gone off. Fortunately, the switch was set to safe, but like 5 other switches self-activated on the way down. That bomb was convinced that they had dropped it on purpose to explode. But when it got to that last fail-safe, it was like, well, wait a minute, no, in the cockpit it said, back in the cockpit, thousands of feet above me, it said safe, so I won't go off. It goes on and on. We got to prevent this. We can't wait for one of these to actually happen. We have to prevent it. So how can I participate? I would love it. Now, Art is already a part of our network, for sure, and he gets a lot of emails from me. It would be awesome if PSR could work with a team of people here in Maryland to meet with your legislators. This is something that PSR is doing in many states, and that is, please see me. I'll stick around if you're interested, or talk to Art about being part of a lobby team here in Maryland. You have some pretty powerful people in Maryland. I think you have the ranking member. Which committee is he on? Can't remember. Steny Hoyers, a big shot. Carden.
He's the minority whip.
Yeah. You've got powerful people in Maryland. I mean, you could have a lot of impact as citizen lobbyists. Plus, it's easy to visit these people, right? Because they're never very far from you. And PSR does, yeah, who's old enough to remember Snoopy? PSR does media waves. I've got a typewriter. Okay, so one of the things that we do, we have these legislative lobby teams in various states, but we also try to think about, okay, when would be a good time for us to get into the media? So last year, Hiroshima Day, we did a media wave. It was very successful. We wrote a lot of op-eds and got a lot of op-eds published around the country. Towards the end of last year was the Vienna conference. We did some more. The beginning of this year was the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. We heard that they were going to move their clock up 2 minutes, as though 5 minutes to midnight wasn't bad enough. And so we got together a group of people around the United States to write op-eds. Their op-eds were ready to go when this announcement happened on January the 22nd. We got 23 op-eds placed in the United States. So, this is one way to get the media to work for us instead of against us. We're also building speakers, groups of speakers. So we're training people to do Rotary presentations, and it turns out that the Rotary itself, first of all, anybody here a member of Rotary? There you go. So the Rotary has world peace as one of its ultimate goals. They're promoting world peace. And the Rotary doesn't fool around. The last